Sorry about that.
Oh, yep. Okay.
Thank
Do you want me to do it over again?
No, that's fine.
Okay. So the meeting minutes were approved, and we're going to move on to the discussion of the 2021-22 budget. There, I covered it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen.
Okay. Excuse my laundry in the background.
You should be seeing the Finance Committee budget for tonight. Okay, so what I did is updated from the last time we met. Dr. Roach met and I met with, and Dan and Dr. Farina met with a whole group of individuals, the major areas being technology, facilities, curriculum, special ed, to go over their budgets, basically line by line, and what their requests were. Based on that, we did make some changes, some adjustments. It's a net adjustment, which is great. We're moving in, well, I think the right direction, but there are still work to be done on some of the areas. First, I'm going to show you a slide again, or the PowerPoint again, where we're listing the dates because these are very important moving forward. The tentative proposed final budget adoption is on May 13th. Just as a reminder, at that night, we pass a budget, but it's still a month before we make the final budget, so adjustments can be made. So whatever is decided at that point is basically temporary. It's proposed, but it can be adjusted moving forward.
Okay.
Staff adjustments since the last meeting. Last time I had all the staffing additions to the budget. Now I want to show the adjustments. After going through where we are with enrollment in kindergarten and where we are right now, I had four new full day kindergarten teachers in the budget previously. We reduced that by one, so it's a reduction of one. There's an adjustment to, after, like I said, going over with each individual, we adjusted the network administrative compensation. I had it too low, so I had to adjust that as is an administrative position. We added 2 autistic support teachers the last time. Usually when autistic support teachers are added, there's a need for paraprofessionals. I wasn't sure where that lies. So when we met with special ed with Mrs. Gibling and Dr. Farina, we discussed it. We usually have 2 per classroom. That's a minimum. That we could possibly do just with 2. So I needed to add 2 more autistic support paraprofessionals. As far as the other 2 that normally we would employ, they're being realigned. So we're trying to look at costs, and they felt that we could probably realign 2 paras so that each of those would have 2, but it would just come from a different area. And then I made adjustments to custodial maintenance personnel after talking to Doug. I had some part-timers in there that we could eliminate, and 1 full-time position that wasn't being filled, that moving forward that I had in the budget that he didn't have on his list. So we were able to reduce that somewhat. And then the summer camps. I didn't have the information I needed for the Power Up and the Ready to Learn grant. And even though they're coming from federal funds or state funds for Ready to Learn, they need to be in the budget. So I added some additional dollars for the camps, for the Power Up and the Ready to Learn. That one's in August. The Power Up camps start at the end of June. So I did add some additional federal dollars to support the Power Up camp. I already have the Ready to Learn block grant funds. So I had to make some adjustments. Net effect of all this is only $7,500. So it's actually an increase because of adding the paraprofessionals, the summer camps, which and then the adjustment to the network administrator. But we're at least able to do all that, what we need, with a $7,000 increase. Okay. Changes in the professional, technical, and other services. Here, there is a savings. We had after, again, meeting with special ed, we need an increase in the IU services. We decided we took out the Lakeside counselors for next year because currently we are using Ready to Learn block grant funds. In the past, we used those funds for full day kindergarten. We didn't use it for full day kindergarten this year because we didn't have full day K because of the pandemic. At that point, Dr. Farina took the opportunity to put in some counselors, which we needed during this critical time during COVID-19, but we don't have the funds to support that next year. We'll move those funds back to support those teachers that were previously supported by that grant. So we reduced the Lakeside counselors and removed them. We made some adjustment. I have additional professional development, which is true, but we made some adjustments in a number of areas to take funds from different supplies, some of these services to add to professional development where we feel, Mrs. Bass feels are really, really needed for next year. And then the reduction of out of district placements. As you see, we have additional IU services, but we also have a reduction in out of district placements, which helps. The net effect is a savings of $222,000. And that's mostly because of the reduction of the Lakeside counselors. Adjustments in, as I said, in order to increase some of the professional development, we made some other changes in supplies, books and periodicals, support fees, and dues and fees. So we were able to pull out a savings of $81,000 spread throughout different areas in the budget. Total decrease in the budget is $296,000 at this point. Positions, and I left this one in just as a reminder. We have positions that are in the budget we didn't fill or couldn't fill this year for different reasons. And security safety services was discussed at the facilities meeting. We need to move forward with that, and definitely would be a help with some of the other areas, even with some of the crossing guard areas, which we're currently being staffed by our administrative staff in many areas. The crossing guard company, we didn't utilize those funds. We did award it to a company who could not find any way to support the crossing guards. So those funds are still in for next year because we still need crossing guard services. Just have to find individuals that are willing to do that, or a firm that can find individuals to fill those positions. Expenditure summary. This is adjusted from last time based on the changes that we were able to make to the budget. Instructional area, of course, is going to be your instructional and support services are your major areas, because that's your psychs, your psychologists and support, your librarians, and then of course instruction, where most all your teachers in your special ed areas. So that's 88.88% of the budget. The 3,000 is operation of non-instructional services. That's your student activity account and your athletics. And then other financing, as I said last time, this is significantly besides your that I have in here additional funds in the budgetary reserve because of charter school students. This year there is an extreme increase in the students going to charter schools. Hopefully that will change next year, but with not knowing that, there's $1.5 million estimated, and that's based on actual occurring right now. So the funds that I have in there is what we are basically paying out in our current year. So it's not an estimate. I didn't add any new individuals to that list. I'm hoping that more students will come back to the district for next year.
Sandy, is that 1.5 million new?
It's new for the 21-22 budget. It's not new since last time.
Right, I understand. What I'm saying is the previous pre-COVID or pre this year, the budget for or the expenditures for charter schools was about 1.5, and now we've doubled it now with this. So that's an additional 1.5 above what was already there.
That is correct. That is having a significant impact moving forward. There's some areas that we didn't really need to deal with previously, and so therefore your expenditures are inflated because of the need. I mean, we need to support. We don't have a choice. They're determined by their 363 calculation, and we need to pay that out. But again, we hope by putting in the reserve account, we can move it to where it's needed for charter schools, but we're hoping that that will change and the numbers will be reduced.
So whatever gap we see, let's just say the gap is $3 million. 1.5 of that is new money added this year due to additional charter school tuitions.
Correct.
Right.
Thanks.
And then this is just a graph of the general expenditures based on the numbers you saw in the previous slide. Revenues. Now, I know last time you were looking at 4.9 million as a gap with a 0 millage increase. With the changes that we were able to make last week, it's reduced to 4.5. As you can see, there's really a need to have a tax increase for next year. We can't sustain that type of fund balance moving forward. I know we usually use part of or at least budgeted to use part of our fund balance. But this is large. We can't use our fund balance to support this total amount. Then if the 3.7 maximum takes it down to 3.1 needed from fund balance. And I have people in the waiting room, excuse me. So it's down to 3.1. And as Dr. Roach just said, 1.5 of that is your charter schools. If we were moving forward, and you have a lot of changes you've made in this year's budget, as far as additions and staffing with implementing full day K, and 2 autistic support teachers and 2 paraprofessionals and instructional coach and network administrator. So we're moving, and their needs. I mean, to support the program and the kindergarten program and with special education to support the students for autistic, we need to add those positions. So with that in charter schools, the 3.1 isn't a surprise. And then here's just a graph of the 0. As you can see, obviously large part is local. 3.7 is just a larger part is local. Now I know one of the items I usually show you and I added to the slide is the tax increases based on different percentages, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 3.7. And this is just to show you the effect that would have on a median assessed value. Now, you have to understand the median assessed value, as far as the medians at this point, I have not received them from the county. So this is based on last year's median assessed. They don't change very much, and the average, it changes very little, but there could be a slight change in the medians. And again, I do medians and average because Mrs. Hopkins has always asked me for the average. So
yeah, median stinks. I agree with her.
So, and remember, this is on the homesteads. Now, another question is, how much funds will be allotted for the homestead exemption? Because last year there was some difficulty, and it's based on revenues from slots, and its determination is made by the state. The indication is that it'll be probably what it was last year, but I really don't know that yet. So, and we have not received that at this point, and that should be soon. By the beginning of May, I should have that number.
Can we reject the homestead just out of curiosity?
I don't know why you would want to though.
Okay.
Because it means that more funds would have to come from the taxpayer.
Okay, just checking.
State. You could, but it's a homestead farmstead exemption. So.
No, I mean excluding it from going to the taxpayers.
Oh no, nope, that's an absolute required. In fact, we can't, even if we have pennies left over, we're supposed to redistribute that the following year. So I always and we're allowed to keep a very, very small amount for administrative, whatever. We don't. We just distribute it all because it's the safest way. They actually ask you each year if there's anything left over. Because as you can imagine, we're distributing among 10,000 parcels, so there's always going to be some little pennies or here or there.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And then revenue adjustments from April 6th. Like I said to you, I did make, well, this is not good news, of course. The current real estate assessed values dropped slightly from February to April. It could be, you do remember we had a settlement on a very large property, and that I'm sure that one came through for April. So we don't have enough increases in assessed value to offset that. So right now we're looking at a decrease from February of our real estate, not from last year, but just from the last time you saw the revenue. And then I raised the interim real estate. I think I have it at 200,000. I raised it to 225. You know, we weren't at 225 last year, but it was a pandemic. And then we were like 209 before that. But I think with the sales that have been occurring, that next year, and as they say, as soon as properties go up for sale and sold, that we'll hit the 225,000 next year. I also added, as I showed you earlier, the Power Up Camp was added for the budget for expenditures for next year. So I added the the funds that would need to support that program of 48,000. So that's added to our federal revenue. So total adjustment was 58,423. Now this isn't final for revenue. The state hasn't passed the budget yet, so we don't have that as definite numbers. So that may help, but not anticipating really any change there. And we will continue to look at our local revenues. Right now, we should hit our EIT for this year. I have a significant increase for next year already projected, thinking that we'll be back on track because this year it's definitely down. I actually thought that I was going to be too low for this year and more funds would come in, but I think we're going to be closer than I thought because we were told to reduce it last year. If you remember, it was, you know, with Berkheimer, with everything going on, they suggested you reduce it by a certain percentage. I think we'll be fine, and I think we'll exceed that this year. So next year, I have a significant increase.
How much you reduced it last year?
I reduced it at least 10% or more. So I took it down to 3.1. I have 3.6 in for next year. So I'm being optimistic. You know, usually I'm the conservative and we get more money, but I think we'll make it. What I do is Berkheimer assists us in developing projections based on the information they have, which is much better information than we have. So I am using those predictions for next year. Now, one thing that is low and that we won't meet this year, which is no surprise to anyone, is interest. Interest is basically bottomed out. So we'll see, we're not going to see very much. And then we have expenditures this year. This is going to be a difficult year to project going out just because the added expenditures in some areas and lower expenditures in another. For example, we usually have almost zero unemployment. At this point right now, by the end of March, unemployment, we've hit $125,000, which isn't in the budget. I have about 50,000 in, or 53,000 in to be exact. And usually we use almost nothing. And that will grow. So we still have three months. Now, I think some of those funds will come back to us in years to come, long when Georgie will have to take care of that. Because they were, a lot of people were approved, but they, you know, really we're already compensating them, or it's over periods of time where they normally wouldn't receive compensation over Christmas and so forth. So, and then there was, as you probably heard and read in the paper, there were some fraudulent ones that also hit all the districts at 1 or 2 or 3, where people were able to submit for claims and then supposedly being awarded, but what happened after that, I don't know. So there's still a number of things that have to be resolved in the unemployment area. So major increases in the budget. As you saw last week, I just tweaked this a little bit. Obviously, salaries are going to be increased every year with their settled professional contract and our other compensation agreements. There are increases, and I know we're working on some of them at this point that will be in place for next year. And of course, retirement. Pardon me?
Do you have like the highest amount in for those other agreements?
I have, well, that's to be determined, because if we make adjustments as discussed at the meeting, I may not be able to quite cover that. So
Okay,
it'll really depend on how things wind up.
okay,
Retirement, definitely an increase to 34.94%. So that of course has a huge impact. That's just the increase in retirement over last year. And then in the other areas, I know we already talked about the technical professional services, and other purchase services, the Western Center. And then as we spoke about earlier, as Dr. Roach said, our budgetary reserve for charter schools, we have 1.5 million, a little over 1.5 million just for that. I have 70,000 that we put in case we needed to transfer to other accounts.
Yep.
But right now we're at, a little over 1.5. I think that's probably it. So, I mean, I know we were trying to make changes. We're still going over the budget, and asking anyone who has, the different administrators to see where they can pare back. We do have, but I think you have to keep in mind that the 1.5, the addition of full day K, the autistic support, the instructional coach, and network administrator, all those additional items, and to be able to support that in their budget, we need to have the revenue to support some of that. Those are the major changes. I am open. I posted a number of items on our SharePoint, just in revenue, some more detailed, some summary documents, which I could bring up here too, that shows, and maybe I will bring up the one. Let's see. Stop sharing that document. Can't seem to get my mouse where I need it. It's great when you have multiple screens.
I can't get used to that.
It's just moving my mouse sometimes. It's a little crazy, but I love it. Are you seeing, because I can't tell, the object? This
Yes.
is an object summary.
Yep.
So I always find this valuable because it breaks apart the entire budget, all the functions, and I'll show the function one also. But it breaks down by the object codes, and as you can see, I'm in personnel, which obviously is the largest one for the district. And then you move down to the benefit areas, and you can see the benefits as they're outlined. Now, the medical cost is a decrease, and that's what's saving. Like, you look at the total in the 200, which is great. It's actually only $145,000 increase, and you see retirement is $444,000 increase. So we're able to achieve some other decreases in, like, the medical and RX. You have to add, if you're looking at 271 and 276, before I had them combined. So it's not really 1.185. It's really have to combine is like 300,000. But the benefit there is we had a decrease in one of the benefits, an increase in prescription. Of course, as you know, there's more biologicals and other items that are coming to the forefront that will increase our prescription costs. But we have some items in place that at least help to reduce those costs that we have in our agreements, which is helpful. The other thing is we are adding another program, which we don't have all the details yet, to provide options for an area that we didn't have options for before. So the medical, and remember, the increase in the participation of our staff is increasing by 1%. I take that into consideration when I'm calculating the cost. These are net costs that are in there, because I offset any funds that receive from our staff is netted against the cost of the coverages.
Oh, so what's in our budget then is only the district's cost?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then moving down, like I said, I like this. The object codes, it's our supplies, And then our 700 is we call our property, which is our equipment, capital equipment that we may be purchasing. There's usually not a lot in this area because most of even your tech supplies comes out of your 650. And then of course, we have our bonds area. So the good thing is you're not seeing a large increase in this area. We're finally at a leveled off. So that's great. It allows you not to have to worry about those increase in the debt service costs, which is level debt for a number of years. And it will only go down. So in the future, for future planning, and Doug has in his budget a feasibility study. So you can look at future planning for the next renovation, which Dr. Farina will tell you right away, it needs to be the high school.
I think we all agree with that.
I think so. As I said, I was in there last Wednesday and I agree. And I'm sure Dr. Carpenter would agree also. Now I'm sharing my screen. Are you seeing the summary?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this is by function code. So you can see here budgeted is compared to the prior year budget and then the actuals that were in 1920. Just remember 1920 was a pandemic year. And of course, we didn't spend as much as we thought we would spend due to that. So you can see moving down where there's increases, autistic support probably sticks out because there's a significant increase, but by adding 2 teachers and 2 paraprofessionals, that's what's causing that large increase. And then again, this is on your SharePoint, so you can review it and let me know if you have questions. Trying to think of any other highlighted areas that I would point out. It's mostly throughout the budget. We have an increase, as I said earlier, in services, which would have showed in the object code because of our substitute services and your ESS and areas that we needed to fill in for our staffing. Let's see. Now that's it.
Okay.
And go back to stop sharing. And I am open to questions. Excuse me. I also have information on revenues if you want to see some additional revenues. I've only updated with the information I have here. Basically, I have not changed it since the February finance meeting because, again, the state hasn't passed the budget. And there has been, we're looking at how we're going to utilize and budget the ESSER funds. That'll be another kind of variable. There's also a variable that I'm concerned with for this year moving into next year. And that is something that we're investigating at this point. So transportation subsidy, if we pay our contractor for all this, for the services that were not delivered, less their variable cost, we would receive the subsidy that we're receiving this year, which is for last year. Now, if you remember, we paid the contractor last year so we could maximize our subsidy. We paid them at 87.5% most of the time, a little reduced prior to that. So what they did moving forward is there was an act that passed, I'm not sure what month that was, January, maybe February, that if we would pay the contractor what they would have received less their variable cost, we would be guaranteed the subsidy that we're receiving for this year. And why is that important? The reason it's important is you receive subsidy based on utilization. So that subsidy for our buses is based on ridership, which if you saw our buses during COVID, there wasn't very many people on them. So the ridership, the miles traveled with students, it's with and without, but it's on with students, the year of the buses, there's a number of factors. Now our non-public buses, and remember, we only did 4 days and not 5. So it can significantly reduce our subsidy. Now our subsidy is about $1.5 million. What we're doing now is weighing if we should, and it would be up to the board too. I mean, we wouldn't make just arbitrarily, but we'll come to you with that information. If we pay them a certain amount of dollars, we could claim the same subsidy that we're receiving this year. We'd be looking at, and I had, and maybe Dan can speak, but we're estimating right now. So we don't have any firm numbers, but it's probably over $400,000 we would need to pay to our contract. So that is yet to be determined. That will have an effect on the revenue stream for next year.
So that would be over top of the 87% we already paid them?
Well, that was for 1920.
Do you know?
Yeah, well, yes. Well, we paid them in 1920. Now we're in 2021. So because we paid them in 1920, we maximized the subsidy for this year. Now the question is, what do we do for 2021? Do we pay them an additional amount? If we do, then we'll get the full subsidy. But what we have to weigh is the calculation of the subsidy at the reduced ridership and reduced utilization. What does that drive out compared to what we would receive and compared to what we would pay?
Right.
So that is being worked on as we speak. I don't have that for you currently, but we will in not too long of a time period. And that will be a decision, made by the board. If it's to our advantage, I assume you would want to compensate the contractor. Obviously, if it's not, I'm not even going to recommend. I wouldn't recommend it, but it would reduce the subsidy that's supporting the revenue that's listed in the budget currently.
So what would that, so basically, technically, the 87%, what does that change it up to? If we had to pay them 400,000, is that basically the entire 100%?
No, what it is I don't know what their variable cost is. I'll be able to provide that to you once we calculate it. I don't have that right now, but basically we have to do is, so we're paying them now. We paid them all year for non-pubs, okay? And we do get a non-public reimbursement. And then all the buses that did not travel, now we used over half the vehicles. So the other half that were not utilized and we did not pay for, we'd have to calculate based on the daily rate for those vehicles minus what they gave us as variable cost that they didn't cost them anything. They didn't pay their drivers. And then a calculation is made of what that number is. And then you have to compare it to, if you calculate what we actually utilized and what the subsidy would be that would drive out from that. Now, the problem with that is we're not, you're based on filling your buses. So even if kids do not ride the bus, but they have the opportunity to ride and you schedule them, you count them as a rider on the vehicle. Well, this year, there were not very many students that rode the bus. We, basically we'll maximize right now what our ridership is for those vehicles for the year. But it's a 4-day week and not a 5-day week. So we're not transporting that other day. So all those vehicles that we don't transport, we'd have to take that into consideration in the calculation. So the 87.5 was last year. That's gone. That's not even an estimate. But right now it's based on some numbers that they have to certify to us their variable cost. And they gave us something, which I assume was okay. I could probably speak to that. And then we just have to move forward in making that calculation. So we'll come to you with that when we know it. I just want to mention it now because I may be making an adjustment to this revenue. And you say, wait a minute, you told me we were going to bring in this amount of dollars. And the issue for me is that revenue stream is for next year. The expenditure for those buses, if we pay, is this year. So if you're paying out this year's cost to get next year's revenue. If I don't, if the decision is and doesn't work out to pay that amount, then I'm automatically decreasing that revenue next year, but I'm not decreasing any expenditures because that expenditure isn't in next year. Now, having said that, if we don't pay and it comes out to 400,000 or 500,000, those funds are will be available in your fund balance. So you can look at it that way. Well, I have fund balance to support that decrease, and I'm going to use those funds to support the budget. So just, it's like movement of money, I guess.
So what happened? So what happened to the districts that didn't pay anything last year?
Well, they didn't, then their subsidy was reduced for 2021. So they
Okay.
decided they would take a reduction in subsidy this year. Now, some of them paid, it's all over the place, Melanie, because some of them, had in their contracts that they had to pay like 50%. So it's possible that they have those subsidies and I don't know what, and then if they were back in, every district's different. If they were back in for the year or 5 days sooner, then of course that makes a difference in the calculation.
Okay,
So,
all right, I didn't think of that part of it.
yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Everybody's different.
Yeah. Sorry,
Sandy,
Keith.
regardless of what decisions made for this year, does it impact future subsidy or revenue? So if this year they decide to pay or not pay, and then the following year, next year's, the following year's subsidy is based upon the previous year's usage and paying. So it doesn't, I'm assuming if it's a year-to-year thing, it doesn't hold over multiple years.
You are correct, 100%. So it's just getting through next year as far as what we're doing this year and next.
Okay. Anybody have questions?
I invited the whole cabinet group here to make sure that if there were specific questions on any items, I appreciate everyone being here this evening. And wanted the board to, kind of summarize things up there in terms of other questions or some direction. Our plan, I think, is for Sandy to do a little bit of what was shared tonight at the meeting on Thursday to, again, get some feedback from the board or any direction. So any questions? And I think we're trying to schedule another meeting before the 13th as well, for another follow-up from this committee meeting as well.
Okay, that would be good. Questions?
I had a few. So how exactly, we have received 3 federal grants now for COVID relief, correct? Well, we haven't necessarily, there have been 3 awards of.
Correct. 3 awards, yes.
I've got a bunch of questions and you probably don't know the answer to all of them, but I figure I ask them, and maybe for the next meeting you'll have the answers. How much of that have we actually already received? How much is the total we're expecting? Where is that money going? And how does that factor into the budget?
Okay, so we have some of that budgeted in this year's budget for because we knew about it previously. We have spent the major part of the PCCD grant that was awarded, and the second part is being used to for the Power Up Camp. The ESSER funds, like all the county funds, were expended last year, mostly for PPE. And technology, we've utilized funds for technology. Now you have to remember, these ESSER funds are one-time funds. You spend it and they're gone. You can spend the ESSER 3 funds up to 2024. And the other fund, ESSER 2 is, I guess, 2023. So we're using part of it. Some of those revenues are in the revenue budget that I proposed earlier. I have 500,000 in. At that point, I just added some for that portion of the PCCD grant that I know we're expending next year. And then Dr. Farina has it going to supporting the second year for a Power Up type camp. So it's going to be spread out, and I can show you now these 3 ESSER 3. I don't know if we have a number. I'm not 100% sure if it's the final number, but we do have a number of the expected revenue. Now, we did not, we're still working on how we're going to spend this money. It just has to be carefully planned, because once it's gone, it's gone. It's not sustainable. So a lot of items, some of the items are for technology. I know Mrs. Bass has used some for her curriculum area to support that. We used some funds we can use for some salary areas, but that's a little dangerous, because you want to use it for that, for any additional ones that you're not needing going forward, but going forward you won't have those funds. So Judy, we'll put something together for you, because it is confusing. the thing is, us as everyone has to be very careful moving forward how you use it, just because, a number of years ago, we got those additional federal funds, people used them right away, and then they couldn't sustain it moving forward, and that became a problem for budgets and taxpayers and everyone else. We didn't do that though. We were careful. And we just have to do that.
That's why that's why I was asking the question, like, what of this money are you already incorporating into this budget? Like, how is it affecting it? So on and so forth. Just, numbers. I don't need to know you spent, $4,800 on X, but at least broad categories of, okay, in our first grant, we've already received all this money. This is how much we received, and we spend it on this. We're currently working on the second grant money, and this is what we're spending it on, like just generalizations, but it would be really helpful to see that money and how it impacts the budget.
Sure.
Because these are going to be expenditures, even though we're using the federal grant money. So I just think for me, it would be really helpful to see that money flow in and flow out. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, good. And are you currently budgeting for, I know you greatly increased the nursing staff to help out the nurses because of like the testing and all that. Are you budgeting to keep all that extra staff next year?
No.
No? Okay. All right. How about other places where we've increased staff? Or are there even, did we increase like custodial staff to help with cleaning and stuff, right?
We did, but that got cut this week.
Okay, so the increases of this year to deal with COVID related functions, we haven't carried over to next year. Is that an accurate statement? Okay, thanks. That was my questions.
Keith, excuse me, Keith, Peg?
Well, it's the standard question I ask all the time. What do we give up? It's we keep piling it on, but sooner or later there's not going to be anything there. So there's got to be things we can give up. And I know the administration is going to push the building principals to really clean up the fluff, and that's all we can ask for.
Sad about that is that's the little part of it.
I know, but
it's nothing.
If it helps
for the rest of it.
So we're going to have to really make some tough decisions here, and adding full day K was a must. I mean, that should have happened 20 years ago, and that I can hang my hat on maybe a tax increase to pay for that. But what do we give up? And that's just I'm not asking for an answer. I'm just, please, dig deep.
So, or the other part of that is we just, again, like you said, maybe we have enough to increase for full day K. Yeah, but even at the most increase, we still can't even come close. It's not even close. And I don't see anywhere for $3.5 million. Like, I don't see any cuts for $3.5 million that would cut into staff. That'd be the only place that it could come out of, that it even would be close to it. Do you know what I mean?
It's just a lot of car washes and bake sales.
Yeah, more than that. More than that. Keith, do you have, what do you have?
I really don't have much other than, over the meetings I've been following, where we've been spending money. I'm glad Judy asked that question. Sandy had been updating that us indirectly the entire time, but it'll be nice to get a list as to what it was spent on. As Peg said, implementing full day kindergarten is the best thing we could have done this year, but the worst thing we could do is raise to the max. We need to figure out something in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, to see what we can do. And unfortunately, there isn't much we can cut. It's all required. We're going to make some tough decisions in
Yep.
2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Well, there-
Yep.
there's no step, so that we know that's 0, 0. So that's the real budget piece here. And then the other question I had for for Melanie prior to this, again, last year being the first year going through and having an X amount of, I figure it was just shy of 2 million. Is there a tolerance, using any fund balance to help offset that to get a better handle? And that's a board discussion, and whether that's here in the committee. And I know Sandy's not going to have an answer, but I'll ask the question anyway in terms of that projected, what's projected towards the end of the year to know what that number is. And Sandy, I know you don't have that because there's so many moving parts to it at this time, especially in this even goofier year than previous years in terms of a projection of remaining balances in the budgets and whatnot.
If we didn't have that charter school expenditure, it'd be a little bit more palatable.
That sure would be a lot
The
better.
only thing we can hope for is that
Yeah.
next year we do get a good deal of people coming back.
Wait, who's talking? Because I can hardly hear you.
It was
Is that
me.
Dana? Oh, it was you. Oh, it sounded like Dana. I'm like, I don't see Dana. Okay. Yeah, so is there anything possible we can do to try to get the kids back? I mean, that's like part of the key. I don't mind going into it saying we're going to use fund balance because we do that every year. Yeah, that $1.5 million is killer.
Yeah, I mean, see, we're obviously, as I think I shared, if not, I'll share again, we're having a survey to go out. That's more for probably our in-house people, but we're going to target the people that are out as well to see if they are, because there were some that took their piece off the board last summer, said, I don't want to be a part of it, and I'm out. I'm going to cyber because that's what these people do all the time, and that's great. And let me know when you come back. Honestly, I think a big trigger is going to be, and we will not have an answer till August, is going to be masks. There are some people that are in cyber or charter, or they went to Faith Christian or wherever else they went because of masks. And I don't think we don't have much to say on that in terms of the mandate that's out there. So we'll be collecting information in the next 2 or 3 weeks on terms of what the instructional models piece. But we have talked, and hopefully we'll have something ready for the students that are in cyber and the students that are in homeschooling, so we can get a better handle on that. And then the initial timeline had an early June type of declaration to really set our stage for the summer, as opposed to having multiple meetings in the summer about changing the model in case things go really out there. So, I mean, Sandy's budgeting for exactly, in essence, no one else that's out based upon that coming back. So I guess you could take a look at that number, and it's a budget, right? It's how it works. It's a projection on terms of that piece to it. So, I mean,
Well, I also want to add that, and I'm pretty sure I can speak for the board for this. I don't think we wanted to cut anything. Do you know what I mean? I don't want everyone to think that they have to tighten to a dollar. Yeah, and you guys are here too. I don't know if you can follow me on that, agree with me, not agree with me. I don't think that's ever our intention, is to completely cut something or make it so bare bones that we can't function. Anyone agree, disagree with that?
I agree with you.
No,
You
okay.
know, we don't want to keep cutting things to the bare bone, because prime example is the phone system a few years ago. Things weren't done about it for years, and it comes back in the end and bites you in that rear end again. And so we need to stay up with, the current technology, the current teaching methods, the facilities. We really can't afford to cut anything in the long run. So it's better doing that preventive maintenance. It's something that you learn in the service that other people don't learn about. We have to keep up with it.
Sandy, I have a question for you. When we talk about the additional 1.5 to charter, we're using that as a generic term. That also includes all the kids who went to parochial schools, private schools, stuff like that? Or is that additional on top of that? Because I know we lost a lot to like Faith Christian and Salem Christian. Is that on top of the 1.5 million?
No, we don't pay anything. The only thing that cost there is for transportation. There's no other cost. So you're not seeing any reflection of that in there. It's just those who are in either cyber, charter, or brick and mortar, as we call it.
All right, so the ones that went off to the like the Faith Christian in Salem, the only additional cost we had is the extra transportation to transport them there as opposed to our buildings.
Correct. The only issue with those going to non-public, it reduces our student enrollment.
Right.
It goes into a calculation eventually into subsidies and so forth, but not a huge impact right now, but
Okay,
it does decrease our enrollment.
that's helpful. Thank you.
Is that, and I'm not saying, because if anyone else is listening, I'm not saying this is what I want to do, but is there, are we obligated to pay the non-public transportation?
Yes.
Okay, just checking, just checking.
Anything
Been
within,
challenged before.
yeah, anything within 10 miles outside of our boundaries, we are required to transport
Oh, within 10 miles.
outside of the, yes.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
However, furthest boundary, so
Okay,
we're long, so that gives a whole lot, that's a huge
It's
area.
like Collegeville to Allentown.
yep, pretty much. Pretty much,
Correct.
okay.
Melanie, you said that, about people listening. It's a real shame that none of the public tunes into these budget meetings or anything,
Yeah.
because they could learn a lot more.
Yeah, I know, this is a really good forum and I
But it's
appreciate
all going to be your fault because you're president. So,
it. Yeah, I
right,
know.
Judy?
Yep. It's
Keith,
okay.
I think they just listen to it when it's taped. See,
I
they
think you're
do it
right.
at night.
I hope so. I hope they do. I really do, because this is.
More faith than I do. I'm sorry. I'm a
Yeah.
pessimist in that aspect.
Yeah, I don't think that.
There's nothing like a good finance committee meeting to put you to bed at night.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're
Peggy,
running for office, you should tune in.
yeah, true.
Very much so.
What other information will be helpful for the board, whether it's preparing in thought for
I
Thursday?
think
Or,
it's a moral decision, to tell you the truth. Honestly, I think underneath, the board doesn't really want to raise the taxes at all, especially when we're in a pandemic year. And it's still a pandemic year. Like, everything else seems to be going up. And it doesn't seem fair to push that on the backs of everyone else again. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I've talked to some of the board members, separately, and the sense I'm getting is nobody wants to raise the taxes at all.
I get it. I mean, I think we understand that. It's just a matter of what,
I mean, at some point, maybe it's a gamble. It's a gamble. We hope everybody comes back. And if we have to do what we have to do to make the budget balance by using the fund balance, I don't want to do that either. But I really find it hard to increase taxes, especially this year when step zero.
Well,
Roof is
actually,
leaking,
I'm sorry.
and when your roof is leaking, you have money in the bank, you're going to have to use it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And that's the situation for everybody right now, I think.
Yeah.
I just would caution, we made decisions to add full day K, which, that everybody was definitely in favor of that, no question. But it does come at increase additional costs on top of the budget. And then with the increase in the transportation contract, you're looking at increases that you're going to have to sustain now and into the future. Once you decide not to take the opportunity to raise taxes to a point, you lose that. And I'm not saying I want to do it because I don't want to lose it, but the gap is large, and I don't think you can sustain that moving forward without some kind of increase. But that's up to you. Fortunately, we do have fund balance, but that's one-time money. It's used, you decrease it. The one thing that was a real positive for us this year, although unfortunately with COVID, is having those funds that were additional and we transferred to capital. That Giza project is, you don't want to hear this, is coming in more than they estimated because of everything else and, the rising construction and so forth. You're looking at additional needs moving forward in that capital area. You have some funds where you're going to deplete that to a certain level. Just keep all of that in mind, because these opportunities, once you decide, let's say you don't raise it at all, that's opportunity lost. And then next year, you can't build on that. You can only build on what you currently are at. So
Yep.
just caution.
So you said that, now that brought me up something else when Alan said, is there anything else that might help us? All right, so in my mind, what might help us is if you could give us some kind of an idea of what we do have in fund balance. And I know we don't have phase two's numbers in yet for the Giza project, but I feel like once we get past the full day K and the things that we need to do to Hereford and the furniture and everything, once we get past that, it's not like we're going to be adding more teachers or adding more, and we won't need to renovate for that. Possibly if we could have an idea, and I can't think of anything else other than the Giza project, am I correct? Is there anything else looming that I can't think of, that I'm not thinking of this moment?
Not that I can think of. Just have to remember that each year you also have, your agreements, and your professional agreement is going to increase, and your retirement costs are increasing. And that's projected to continue to increase. So to be able to sustain that, you unfortunately you'd be forced into some kind of increase, and it's not as easily controlled.
Right.
So I'm just a caution.
So maybe that's one other number if you could. And I know it's also a prognostication because you don't know how many teachers you don't need or do need based on enrollment.
Right, and I said, and looking at some of the work that's being done right now in terms of projections for next year and number of students and virtual options and all that stuff. I did see one district that is earmarking some of that ESSER 2 or 3 money as potential to offset teacher salaries with that for a short period of time based upon getting through what not knowing what the fall is going to look like, that type of thing. So
okay,
it's all,
that's a good thing to think of
has
too.
costs to it, but we're obviously, I told you last time we went back and examined all of the retirements as well. So we know there's certain ones that have to get replaced, and other ones we're waiting to see how the numbers and those things pan out.
How many retirements did call in by the end of March? Do we know?
3?
7? No, total.
There was 8 total.
8.
Okay. All right, that's good to know.
In
All right.
professional staff, Georgie? No, that's just
No, that was everyone. That was all staff.
okay. Well, I mean, so any retirements and I think there was only a couple professionals. I accounted for them already in the budget. I reduced the amounts and
Okay.
put in for people in all areas.
Read my mind. Thank you.
Yeah, savings is already accounted for.
Yep. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions? I know we have policy in 1 minute, so.
One quick question. Are we looking to have any kind of a savings in the budget from the departure of Sandy?
Aw.
Are we going to see any kind of a small one?
Oh, I guess it depends on what the next person comes in at.
Oh, okay.
That's true.
What I mean is, like, did we factor that into the budget?
No, actually, so I will have a vacation payout that will go into next year, which probably would offset the savings depending on what you hire the individual at. But I looked at it.
Always here. Okay.
I was just curious if it was if we had accounted for that in the budget.
Oh, don't worry, I looked at all costs.
You could just stay and then we wouldn't have to change anything.
That's true. All right. Well, I think everybody's gotten their questions in. We have some direction, maybe, figure out what the ESSER is coming in and going out as. Fund balance, if we could. And we know what phase 1 of the Giza is. We don't know exactly what phase 2 is yet. Okay. I mean, I can't think of anything else right at the moment. And we'll have a next meeting, but we haven't determined exactly what day that is, but it'll be the end of this month.
We had a suggestion, right, Sandy? What was that?
Monday, May.
Oh, yeah, Monday, May 3rd at 5:30. Not sure if that's possible. It's right before JOC.
Okay.
It gives us a little time.
I think I'm okay with that.
That'll be fine.
I
Okay.
don't have my calendar in front of me, but
Yeah,
it
no, just
sounds like
looking at-
it should be okay, I think. I will let you know ASAP if there's any issue for me. But I think that should be fine.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will make that motion.
Second, I see you saying second, but I don't hear you, but Keith said second, and all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Yep. See you in a bit.
Night.
Quarter.